confrontation in the skies between U.S. fighter jets and nuclear-capable Russian bombers. Two Russian Tu-95 Bear bombers. They flew not far from the California coast. That incident was roughly 40 miles off the coast of central California, right about here.
On June 12, 2014, an unsettling energy settled across the California coastline as two Russian Tu-95 Bear strategic bombers were detected, prying dangerously close to the U.S. territory, with the radar systems confirming their presence just 50 miles off the coast. And this was not a mere routine exercise. It was a proactive display of military ability and might that spread tension across the North American air defense network. As the bombers flew through the skies, U.S. air defense teams felt an increasing sense of unease. Airspace that was typically safe and secure suddenly felt vulnerable. The Tu-95 Russian bombers, known for their long-range strike capabilities and potential nuclear armament, served as a shocking reminder of the military tensions that had been rising globally. The urgency grew as the U.S. officials scrambled multiple F-15 jets into action, their engines roaring to life in response to the looming threat. Each passing second added to the tension, and suddenly, the situation changed from a routine monitoring operation into a potential confrontation. With the clock ticking and the bombers drawing closer, one terrifying question hung in the air. Would this bold incursion lead to a direct conflict, and what would it mean for the fragile balance of power in the region? In the quiet atmosphere of a military command center, high-tech radar systems silently scanned the skies, always on the lookout for any signs of trouble. Suddenly, screens flickered, lighting up with blips that indicated the presence of an aircraft. What began as a few scattered signals quickly transformed into a clear formation, which was a squadron of Russian bombers heading toward the U.S. coastline. The operators, vigilant and sharp-eyed, immediately recognized the Tu-95 Bear bombers, known for their deadly capabilities and nuclear potential. A sense of urgency washed over the room as personnel scrambled to analyze the situation. They elevated alert levels, activating a network of surveillance tools that included advanced ground-based radar and airborne early warning systems like AWACS, which stands for Airborne Warning and Control System. With each second ticked by, they communicated the situation to military commanders. Meanwhile, the F-22 Raptors were ready for quick action and prepared to take off to the skies. Fighter pilots who are trained for these moments were briefed on what to expect, while the ground crew hustled to ensure the jets were ready to go. With the weight of this potential conflict hanging in the air, the command center buzzed with activity and anticipation. Would they intercept these bombers before they crossed into U.S. airspace? Upon detecting the Russian bombers, the U.S. military's initial move would be to attempt a contact. A strong radio transmission would be sent with a serious warning like, "This is U.S. Air Force Command. You are approaching restricted U.S. airspace. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." If there's no response, the urgency will intensify, triggering an escalation in defense protocols. Two F-22 Raptors would be scrambled immediately, launching from a nearby base to intercept and shadow the bombers as they closed in on U.S. territory. If the bombers pressed forward, disregarding the call to stand down, the F-22s would position themselves directly alongside, signaling through visual maneuvers that further advance was unacceptable. This formation, a classic escort move, would send a clear message of obstruction. If the bombers persisted, refusing to change course or communicate, the situation would reach a critical point. Air Defense Command would elevate its alert level, authorizing additional fighter jets and positioning refueling tankers to keep planes airborne. Surveillance aircraft, such as the E-3 Sentry, would also be deployed to monitor and relay data in real time. At this stage, any aggressive movement by the bombers would be met with a proportional response. enforcing U.S. airspace boundaries and ensuring that, if necessary, interceptors would defend against any potential threat. As the U.S. F-22 Raptors close in on the Russian bombers, they assume a tactical formation to reinforce U.S. airspace boundaries. The American pilots initiate standard intercept procedures, positioning themselves on either side of the bombers and signaling through international gestures and wing tilts. Attempts to communicate are made via direct radio channels, demanding identification and issuing warnings about their proximity to the restricted airspace. Inside the cockpit, U.S. pilots remain on high alert, ready for any unexpected moves. They maintain a constant contact with command centers, tracking every maneuver in real time. If the Russian bombers continue on their course, U.S. fighters assess the situation carefully, preparing for escalation if necessary. Furthermore, the ground personnel stay alert, monitoring for signs of hostile intent. If the bombers make sudden maneuvers, the U.S. pilots are ready to respond with defensive actions or engage if required. Every move becomes a strategic signal as both sides work through a potentially volatile encounter over contested airspace. The critical moment comes when the Russian bombers approach the restricted airspace boundary. The U.S. pilots, maintaining a defensive stance, watch closely for any sudden movement. If the bombers deploy flares, alter altitude sharply, or speed up, the U.S. interceptors prepare to act swiftly to defend airspace. Such moves prompt a tactical response, from defensive flares to potential engagement if perceived as an immediate threat. If, however, the Russian pilots signal intent or alter course, it will ease the tension, allowing the U.S. fighters to de-escalate. This restrained response reflects an understanding of the stakes. While neither side wants a diplomatic crisis, both sides avoid appearing passive. The U.S. commanders continue projecting a balanced message, a firm defense of airspace while giving the Russian bombers an option to disengage, averting further escalation and preserving the fragile balance in the relations between U.S. and Russia. Once the skies are clear, the real game shifts towards the diplomatic front lines. Calls will fly across the globe as Washington and Moscow engage in a tense exchange through diplomatic channels, each side calibrating every word with precision. In Washington, statements can be issued emphasizing a firm defense of the national airspace, with U.S. officials showing their military's discipline under pressure, both a warning and a signal of control. Meanwhile, diplomats on both sides will move carefully, knowing that this incident risks reigniting deep-rooted tensions. Moscow will likely brush off the encounter as a routine exercise, while Washington pushes for clarity, demanding assurances that such encounters won't push the edge of the envelope again. Allied countries will tune in, with NATO closely monitoring the next steps as security discussions inevitably heat up across Europe. Behind the scenes, negotiations will unfold with high stakes. Diplomatic teams will work around the clock, balancing posturing with practicality to prevent another close call. While public statements will likely be firm, behind closed doors, officials from both nations will understand the reality. Such encounters, while tactical, walk a razor-thin line. Both sides will be left weighing whether to stand down or dig in, knowing one wrong move could send destruction far beyond the California coast. All right, that's a wrap on today's news. But before you go, here's a question for you. If these high-stakes encounters keep happening, where do you think things might lead? Could it shift military policies, or will diplomacy step in before tensions rise further? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more.